Welcome guys to today's review. This review is on the Squid Industries Triton and the Bear Ops B200. Both of these are going to be in the description if you are interested. And I thought it would be a really good idea to review both of these at once because you really get a nice comparison, right? They're both around the same price, around the same weight, and this is going to be a really good one, I think. To begin, I have divided this up into three different categories, with a bunch of different subcategories. So we have mainly the design, the value, and the flippability, with most of the weighting on the flippability, because that's really what's important probably to most of you on this channel, I would imagine. Considering this is a trainer and the main purpose of a trainer is to train flipping, I would say, when it comes to balisongs. Now, let's get right into it. To begin with, the design. So design I've broken into three categories: aesthetics, fit and finish, and weight and design. So aesthetically, the Squid takes this, and I think that's, although this is subjective, I think it's going to be pretty widely agreed. It's got some really nice lines on it. It's nice and straight, black handles, classy as ever. No latch, right? Just keep it symmetrical. Some nice edges on it. Just really well put together, a really well designed, good looking knife. B200, right? Nothing to complain about, but standard fare. Standard looking blade, some orange handles. Maybe you like that, maybe you think it's a bit much, but not much to say about it, really, right? Whereas I think the Squid is a really nice, well designed, good looking knife. Like I said, for that reason, aesthetically, the Squid takes it. Second category is the fit and finish. How it's put together, basically. What it's made of. That sort of thing. The Squid, in terms of, they're both the same. This is kind of as well in design. I'm just going to go over the length, I suppose. That should be probably weight and dimensions. So fit and finish wise, once again, clean edges, smooth handles, smooth ends. Basically, at the end of the day, the Squid, I'm going to say, is going to take this one, mainly due to the fact that it's just a much cleaner looking knife, whereas the B200 kind of looks like it's carved out of a tree or something, right? It's kind of, the G10 is a little bit blocky. The blade is just kind of, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, I think the Squid is going to take this one for sure, for the fit and finish, how it's put together. Another big element to that is the play, right? In terms of play, the Squid has next to nothing, whereas the B200 has quite a bit more. And that's going to come into flipping a little bit, but it just says something about the tolerances of the knife and how it's put together for the most part. Another thing is the channel handles really are a really nice feature, right? It just looks nicer, it's a lot cleaner, feels nicer when you're flipping it, whereas the B200 has the sandwich handles, of course. So that's it for the Squid. I think the Squid takes it easily on the fit and finish. The last category is the weight and dimensions. So once again, as I was saying, if you take both of these knives here, they're about the same length, about the same weight as well. The B200 comes in at 4.8 ounces, whereas the Triton comes in at 4.65. So they're about the same weight, with the B200 being slightly heavier, but they feel about the same. In terms of the weight dimensions, which I'm kind of is like a third thing, different than weight, different than dimensions, how the weight is distributed basically is a better word. The Squid is, because the handles are aluminum, which is light, and they're channel, and the blade has cutouts, this knife is very neutral, right? So it's weighted kind of evenly across, as opposed to being heavier weighted at the ends. Whereas the B200, because the G10 is so light, it's got a stainless blade, it's got these huge stainless block spacers, it's weighted more towards the ends of the handles. Right? This one's weighted more towards the ends of the handles as well, but much less so than the B200. All in all, everything considered, I would say the B200 is too far weighted at the ends. Right? It's got too much weight at the ends, it's too light in the middle, basically. Whereas the Triton is too neutral, right? It's got not enough weight at the ends. Taking that into consideration, I would say the Squid is closer to ideal than the B200 is. And for that reason, I'm going to give the weight distribution, which kind of comes into flipping in mind, and it also kind of how it handles in hand, right? The weighted ends on this one, they feel a little bit weirder when you're just holding it. The Squid takes this, right? It's a little bit more closer to a higher end flipper, right? It's not there, but it's closer. So for that reason, the Squid takes the category of design, right? It looks nicer, it's got cleaner lines, better design, better tolerances, and the weight, in my opinion, and the weight distribution is much nicer. So that's that. Second category is the value. So in terms of value, basically, what are you going to get for the money? The first part of that is durability, right? How long it's going to last you in its condition, basically. You'll note for the squid, the end of the handles are already, and like on the aluminum, it's already getting dinged up, right? This is aluminum, right? It's pretty soft metal, and so it's going to be really easy to ding up. I dropped it on concrete for the first time today. I had to for this test. You can see it left a nice little ding there, right? So if you're going to flip this, you're going to want to flip it over grass. You're going to want to flip it over your bed, something like that, unless you don't mind it getting a little bit of character, getting a little bit of charm, getting a little bit of a beat up look over time. This knife, as it ages, it's going to age, right? It's going to change how it looks. It's going to be, in a year, this knife's going to be quite a bit different, right? It's going to be dinged up quite a bit more for my use for it. On the other hand, the B200, of course, right, it is used, right? There's scratches on the blade. The tang pins are pretty messed up. The G10 is pretty grungy looking. But for the most part, in a year, this knife is going to look probably the exact same, right? G10 is super tough. Stainless is super tough. There's not too much that can go wrong, right? It's just a couple pieces of G10 and a blade, right? Nothing really can go wrong with it. That's not true. Nothing can go wrong. But for the most part, it's going to be more durable. So the B200 takes it for durability, for sure. The second thing is foibles. So basically what that is it's just like minor issues. The squid, in terms of minor issues, it had a couple things. So one was, after a couple days of flipping it, one of the Zen pins started to come out of the handle. So I think these are just pressed in here, but one of them started to come out. And so what I had to do, I had to basically push it back in there and Loctite it. So that's something you're going to have to think about, something you're going to have to be concerned about. That isn't an issue technically, but it's easily resolvable, right? It's not going to, you don't have to lose any sleep over it. You're just going to have, it's something else you have to Loctite. Minor issue, a foible. A second thing is because it's aluminum and because the tolerances are pretty tight, if you drop this knife in such a way, I find there's certain ways when you drop it, it'll pinch. The aluminum will bend and it'll pinch more than it should, and it'll make the knife less smooth than it should be. And you might think that's a big issue, but it's actually very straightforward to fix. All you got to do is you just grab onto the blade, grab onto a handle, do a little bit of a wiggle, a little bit of a bend, and away you go. It's back to new, back to just the way it was, and it flips, it swings really nicely, no issues. So that's the second issue, right? You got to worry about sometimes when you drop it, you got to unbend the aluminum, and the Zen pins are going to fall out if you don't Loctite them. Now, for the B200, also, the main issue with this one is the pins, which I kind of alluded to earlier, the tang pins. So the tang pins here, right, they're just kind of pressed in there, and as time goes on and the handles pinch the pins, what you're going to notice is that the pins get crushed, and as they get crushed, they'll be able to slide out of the handles, right? They'll just fall out, basically. Easy solution to that is just get a vise, get some pliers, crush the pins, and you'll squish them back in there. You have to do that once every couple months, depending on how you flip it, depending on what's going on. So I recently just crushed these in here, right? They have little marks on the pins, and that's why I've been crushing them. But they're in there now, right? So it's just something you got to keep up with, something you got to pay attention to, and that's that. Overall, comparing both of these issues, I actually gave the edge to the squid. Even though there was two issues there, one issue here, the annoying thing about having the pins fall out is you kind of always got to be paying attention to them. You always got to worry about whether they're going to fall out or not, right? And it's not super easy to tell because these things, as you can see, even though I pressed them yesterday, they still do have a little bit of wiggle to them. It's right just how much wiggle. You might say the same thing about the Zen pins, but the Zen pins were in there. Even when they were falling out, they didn't fall out. They were just out more than they should be. And it didn't seem like they were going to fall out. They seem to be pressed in there pretty well, so I wouldn't be too concerned. It's really easy to tell when they're coming out. Either they're out or they're in, right? And so it's either or. Whereas this is kind of a little middle ground where you kind of got to be worried about it. For that reason, I gave the edge and foibles to the squid. Lastly, price. The B200 is $85. The squid is $110. The edge, of course, goes to the B200. It's pretty straightforward. Overall, I gave the value score to the B200, right? It's just cheaper. It's going to last you longer in its current condition, right? It's not really going to get beat up more than it is right now. Whereas the squid, right, you pay a little bit more. You get some stuff for that, but it's definitely going to get beat up over time. Lastly, flippability. So in terms of flippability, I've divided this up into 5 different categories. Once again, right? Twirls, rollovers, aerials, transfers, and ladders. To begin with twirls. Because the squid is weighted slightly more neutrally than the B200, that makes it better for twirling. Another thing as well is the play. So for twirls, the play is I find the play to be pretty important for keeping things consistent. And the weighting, because there's less weight, it's easier to change direction, right? There's less weight coming, like if the knife hits you here, it takes less energy to push it back. The opposite is true, right, for the B200. Now the play is not a huge deal, right? But just in terms of how it feels to twirl, giving the edge to the squid. Rollovers wise, it's kind of the opposite things make rollovers nice. A little bit of play can be nice for rollovers because you can really get away with a little bit more, right? You don't have to be so precise. Sometimes you can kind of fudge things and they still work out. At the same time, weight towards the end of the handles helps a lot, right? It helps just keep momentum, keep things going, and it makes it just a little bit easier for things to go around. So for that reason, I gave the edge for rollovers to the B200. The squid, it's not an issue, right? There's no rollover tricks you can't do, but it is going to take a little bit more work, a little bit more effort to keep rollovers going that you won't necessarily need for the B200. The third thing is aerials. Aerials, some people like a little bit more play, some people like a little bit less play, so that doesn't really have too much of an effect. But keeping it a little bit more neutral, I find I don't know, I'm going to guess here, it's because it keeps the center of gravity kind of more in the same spot most of the time. I don't know if the center of gravity even really, I guess it could change, like if the handle goes like that. But the point is, aerials feel a little bit more consistent with the squid, I find. So for that reason, I'm giving the edge to the squid in aerials. Lastly, transfers. One thing to note is the coating here on the squid's handles, right? It's pretty smooth. It's smoother than I think I'd like, whereas the G10 is nice and grippy. And I find for transfers, actually having a little bit of a smoother handle is a little bit better. It's easier to manipulate, to do little fanning motions and let things slide a little bit, right? Which is kind of important for keeping transfers smooth. Another thing is just the weight again, keeping it a little bit more neutral, it slows things down a bit and makes things look a little bit more flowy for the squid, as opposed to the B200, which has these more of a hard clank to it. Not necessarily a clank, but you get what I mean, right? It hits a little bit harder, right? So it's harder to make transfers flow. Edge, squid. Lastly, ladders. So I've defined ladders to be things where you're working with the end of the handle, right? So Murnax ladder, choker fans, around the world, those things are ladders. They're not necessarily ladders, but that's the category I put them in. For ladders, easily the edge, this is where the B200 really takes it, is, the B200. It's just more grippy, right? So it's way easier just to keep control of it, and the weighting at the ends of the handles really helps in terms of keeping things going around and around and around, which is what you need. You need momentum for ladders, and the weight distribution of the B200 will give you that. So at the end of the day, what did I give it here? I gave twirls, aerials, and transfers to the squid, and rollovers and ladders to the B200. But overall, I would say, as a general, there's nothing you can't really do with either knife, right? They both flip well. I'm going to give the edge just to how it feels to the squid. If it's a nicer flipper, period, in my opinion. So at the end of the day, we gave the design to the squid, we gave the flipping to the squid, and the value to the B200. Overall, I would say the winner is the squid. I think if you have the money, save up, buy the squid. If you don't have the money, or you're looking to save some money, or maybe you just love rollovers a lot or something, and you think you would like this one more, go for it. They're both good. They're both good for your money. But at the end of the day, I'm giving the edge to the squid here. But I don't think you can really go wrong with either of these. So both of these, once again, will be in the description. Hope you guys like this review. Thanks for watching. Peace.